Have you switched around from job to job throughout your life and you're not really sure why you have? Did you easily get bored in jobs and then moved on? Or maybe you didn't like the people you work with or your boss and you moved on? Well, today I thought it would be interesting to talk about jobs and ADHD and jumping around from job to job. Especially in my earlier days. I did a lot of that. Hello, everybody. I am Maureen. Welcome to the Midlife ADHD group chat. For those who are new, I am 62, diagnosed a week before I turned 60 with ADHD combined type, moderate, after a 7-hour neuropsych eval. And I started this channel at this point, maybe 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago. And I thought it'd be a great place for us to get together, those of us with ADHD or those of us who think they may have ADHD, and chat and support each other. So as I've mentioned in my other videos, I'm talking off the cuff. Usually I have bullet points, but today I'm a little hot and bothered. Probably, maybe not the best time to do a video, everybody, but maybe it is. So basically, I don't know. I just thought I'd do a video because I think this is interesting. I basically choose the topics to talk about based on, a lot of times based on how I feel that day, to be honest with you, or symptoms I'm having, or recent symptoms, or, the manifestation of symptoms, or that kind of thing. But jobs is interesting because although I have not job hopped once I started working in the field I'm in now, I've been working as a companion for 22 years. And I've had, let's see, I think 7 jobs, but they were co-occurring, if that makes sense. So one lady I was with for 9 years. The job I'm doing right now, I've been with her for 13 years, over 13 years. And I would have co-occurring companion jobs, for 6 hours a week or 10 hours a week at the same time, if that makes any sense. So altogether, I've done 7 different companion jobs. And before that, I had trained to be a social worker. So I have my master's in social work. And I work with, as I've mentioned before, kids, teens, and young adults with various challenges. And so anyway, but before that, so I'm talking teens through end of my 20s, so like a 10-year period. I job hopped all over the place. I mean, I look back and I don't think I felt like it was job hopping, but let's see. So I got out of high school. I have a video about this, actually. It talked about underperforming and how I never, actually in my whole life, I've never followed the linear path that many people have. And I talked about, how hard that was for me in some ways, because my best friend went right to college. My sister went right to college. 4 years later, they had their bachelor's degree. For me, 4 years later, and I was kind of flopping around, not knowing what I wanted to do. So I started college at 17, right out of high school, quit within a few months, 1 semester. In the meanwhile, no, right after that, I started waitressing. I actually was a great waitress, and I actually liked waitressing. And I waitressed for many, many, many years. I had to stop. I think I was still in grad school, and I had to stop because of my back. It just really took a toll on my back. But I waitressed in many different restaurants. I really loved, what I loved? And I understood that I loved it. I didn't understand why I loved it. I loved the talking and the communicating, for the most part, with kitchen staff, with other wait staff, with the cooks, with the customers. But I also love the walking, and the walking while I'm talking. That kind of thing. I think it just really, for me, it's always been, again, never connected this to ADHD until I started studying ADHD and understanding myself. But, I think it was really helped me to focus, and so I don't know, I just really liked it. And I was good at it. I had a great memory back then. Oh, God. I could remember. I mean, I would write them down, but I could remember orders. And I was fast. I was fast talking, fast remembering, fast walking. Yeah, and I was very friendly, and I just had a good personality for it. So, I did well. I actually made good money. Helped me through undergrad and grad school, which I paid for myself later on, when I started back to school at 25. But anyway, so like I mentioned, I started back to school at 25, but between, say, 17 and 25, I waitressed. I worked as a receptionist at a car dealership for a couple of years, then at an audio video store. Well, it was more than a store. It was like a big business, big corporation. Had many contracts with Raytheon and colleges around here, and it was kind of a big deal. So anyway, I was a receptionist at that place for a couple of years as well. But I would get the office jobs, again, not knowing I had ADHD. I started to get to know I had ADHD once I started undergrad and started psychology. So in my mid to late 20s, I was like, I seem to be like those boys that are hyperactive and have ADHD. Maybe I do. But kind of didn't give it too much thought, to be honest. I was like, I talk a lot. So the office jobs were tough for me. And, again, as I mentioned before, I have combined type. Actually, the neuropsychologist said I check every symptom box. So that means on the impulsivity, hyperactivity part of ADHD, I have every single symptom. And on the inattention side, I have every symptom. And not saying it for sympathy, but as you can imagine, it was pretty hard for me to focus. Sitting in an office, doing tedious work. You can only imagine. The only good thing is back then I had a lot more control, I feel, over my symptoms. As I have said time and time again, oh my goodness, once menopause hit, my symptoms have gone through the roof. They are so much worse. Once perimenopause hit at 45, actually. Anyway, excuse me, allergies. So I worked in an office a couple different jobs, and again, I liked the receptionist part. I like being friendly and that kind of thing. But I enjoyed, I think, waitressing. I guess the word would be, I don't know if it's enjoy. I felt more comfortable being a waitress. Like, I think that was more for me. And again, looking back, what do you do when you're waitressing? Well, you're walking a lot, and we know that movement helps our brains focus. So I think that was a big part of it. So then I went to school for undergrad in psychology. I minored in philosophy. I took a year off before I went for grad school. And all these years once I did a psych major, I was theater arts for 1 year. Then I went to psychology. I started doing internships and worked at a psych hospital. And all of this I was fascinated, not bored at all. Thought it was so interesting. So let me think. I worked at a psych hospital on it was called the Special Care Unit. It was for kids from 5 years old to, I'm trying to think of our oldest, 13, I think it was. And these kids were, had a lot of issues, sadly, suffered a lot of abuse. And, so as you can imagine, it was emotionally draining. Fortunately, at the time, I moved back home and I had my mom to bounce things off of. And I've mentioned my mom in different videos. She's passed. She's been gone for 22 years, but she was an RN and very compassionate woman, very patient, compassionate woman. And I feel like I'm a lot like her except for the patience. I don't have a lot of patience, especially in menopause. But I would bounce a lot off of her, I do remember one funny little anecdote that I will tell. It's not really funny, but it is. It's kind of bittersweet, to be honest. So I'm in undergrad, in second or third year of undergrad, and at this point I'm like 27. I come home from doing a shift at the psychiatric hospital, and I start talking about our youngest, who was like 5.5. I love this kid. This kid was great. Poor baby. He had so many issues, and I just wanted to adopt him, and I knew that I couldn't. Like, I knew it was a pipe dream, but I remember coming home, let's just brainstorm, Mom. Do you think there's any chance at all that, I could adopt this boy? And she knew about him just because I would talk about him a lot. And I mean, a lot of heartbreaking stuff, like his, when we had a Thanksgiving on the unit, he was so happy. He said it was the best Thanksgiving he ever had, and he's in a hospital unit, and he was just very endearing. And my mom was so compassionate and validating, and she said, well, Maureen, it's wonderful, and, wouldn't he be blessed to have a great mom like you? But unfortunately, sweetie, if we look at the facts, you're a student, you have, don't have your own place to live, you don't have any money, probably it wouldn't work out, and I, which I knew, it's not like I really, really thought I could make it work, but I wanted to make it work. But she was great for that kind of stuff. I could bounce things off of her a lot. And as you can probably imagine, if you are working in the psych field, and you're especially, I would say, working with kids, especially kids, but kids, teens, it is very draining. Interestingly, my 25-year-old's doing similar work right now, and she bounces a lot off of me. And just and a lot of it's just, you need to just, vent. Have someone to vent, have someone to listen. So I was fortunate to have my mom, and I think, my 25-year-old says she's fortunate to have me, so there you go. So anyway, so that was a job that really stood out to me, and I worked there, part-time for a couple of years, I think. In between, I would do like per diem work, and I worked at many different places that were so interesting in the psych field. One was a group home for adults. And I worked and the youngest was 27 and the oldest was 70. And I remember this because when the oldest turned 70, and I was only very part-time, like every other week for a 4-hour shift, something like that. I mean, I was just working just a little itty bit. But I was so flattered because he wanted to celebrate his 70th birthday with me and take me out for Chinese food. Like, how adorable is that, right? And I was like, oh, no, you can't take me out. No. And the other staff said, please let him pay. He really wants to do this. I said, okay, And it was just really sweet. He had a variety of diagnoses, but, he had some developmental delays and that kind of thing. So clearly I drove. But anyway, yeah, but that stands out to me because that was a very sweet story. And I was so touched. I was like, oh, man. But yeah, this group home was really interesting. So I think there were like 9 adults with varying developmental delays. A few of them had some mood disorders, and one had Down syndrome. And then the other ones had various developmental delays. But they were self-sufficient. I would help them cook supper, and, they all took turns. And we go shopping together, and we do chores around the family, not the family, but, it was family for them, the home. It was a great experience and completely different than the working in the psychiatric hospital. Wow, very different. And then I worked at another group home, and this was, again, so some of these were kind of at the same time. I might work 10 hours, a month at one shift, at one place, and, 20 hours a month at another place. And then this other group home was with teenagers, and again, that was, really interesting, of course, and, but a different set of challenges, I would say, than the other 2 jobs, of course. But I gained so much knowledge, and I gained so much, my mom always, she was philosophical in many ways, and she would say, you're gaining so much more than just an education by going. I was going to a public university that I loved for my bachelor's, and just getting really, I don't know, great experiences for me, just meetings, because I grew up in a fairly small town, and I was just meeting people of all different ethnicities, races, backgrounds, and my mom raised me to be very open to different people. She was my father, he was not like that. Like he was not overt. I mean, it's probably typical of men of his era, but, he was certainly not overt in talking about, yeah, you should meet all different people. Well, my mom was. Oh, my goodness. She really was. So she used to say that, like, this education that you're getting is, I forget how she used to word it, but basically you're getting a life education, not just a degree, on paper. And she was correct about that. I was lucky. I really was. I'm so grateful that I had those experiences because I think they've shaped me as a person, really. Anyway, so so I did that, and then my last job, and this is after I get a graduate degree, was working in an inpatient unit. I would say with, for lack of a better word, more higher functioning inpatient unit. A different one, though, than the one I spoke of earlier. And these were teenagers. And I was a family therapist. And so I did a lot of, and individual therapists, actually, and I would do psych assessments. And they were funded by, the various, agencies in our state. So anyway, that was an amazing experience too. That was really, wow, I learned a lot from that too. A lot of responsibility. And unfortunately, what I did kind of discover, and it makes you jaded, or at least it did me, it's a lot of work for little recognition and little money. I remember someone I knew, so I got a master's degree in social work from a fairly prestigious private college for my master's degree. My undergrad was at a public university. And it cost me a lot of money, let me just say that. And someone else I knew the next year graduated with from not as a prestigious college. And this is more an aside about our society. I'm gonna give my little 2 cents about this. But yeah, and he was making like 40% more than I was walking out the door with his master's degree. And that really ticked me off. So he was a business major, and bam. And, I'm a social work major helping people. And, I might be exaggerating. If I did the math, I don't think it was 40% more, but it was substantial. Let's say 25 to 30% more than I was making right out the door with the same degree. And actually, I was at a more prestigious college, and that always ticked me off. And, it still ticks me off because I still see it. Our society just does not value mental health like it should. It really does not. It's still, I was saying it 35 years ago, and I don't really see much of a difference, to be honest. Well, there is more research. But anyway, so then I ended up getting pregnant. And I was working with some violent teenagers, and we would have to restrain them and that kind of thing. So, some of them, not all of them. And once I started to show, like I had already told my bosses, I'm leaving the moment I start to show. And so I was like 4 or 5 months pregnant when I started to show, and I left. I think I gave them a 3-month notice, which I kind of laugh about because that's a long notice. And I actually thought I was going to get back into the field. I actually, every 2 years, you have to get CEUs, continuing education units. And I would, earn them and do it. And I did it up until, I just looked it up as a matter of fact. I was curious, when did I last do it? And I stopped in 2012 earning them. So, yeah, am I doing my math right? Yeah, so for 12 years after, because I did think I'd go back to it. But in the meanwhile, I started companion work. And to be honest, companion work really fits better into many facets of my life. Number one, I was able to do overnights, but get enough rest that I could volunteer at my daughter's school. So it afforded me the ability to get a full-time income and at the same time be a full-time mom and volunteer and be with her. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. Very grateful for that. And so that's worked out well. And And just as, I went along, and I think the ADHD started getting the symptoms, because perimenopause at 45 and then menopause 5, 6 years later. I just don't think I have the wherewithal to do that kind of work. I'll be honest with you. I really don't. I would be able to remember everything. I just can't. And so I did struggle with that because, I used to think, oh my goodness, I worked so hard for this degree. And now after a couple of years, I'm going to, not even work in the field. But it is what it is. Life happens and circumstances change. And, I used to be hard on myself about it here and there. And then I realized, it is what it is. And I'm grateful that I found companion work to do. I'm grateful that I found my first job was for 9 years while my daughter was growing up, from 3 to 12. And I was able to do overnights and be a full-time mom with her. And back then I could do it. Get a little sleep, and focus the next day. Now it would be more difficult for me, I think. But anyway, so yeah. So I think that was a good synopsis, kind of my work history. So interestingly, what do I get when I'm talking about that? Like, what comes to mind? What does that have to do with ADHD, Maureen? Since that's what this channel is about. What this has to do with ADHD is I saw a pattern. When I really look back, in my 20s, I was kind of all over the place, working all different jobs. I really, say from my teens to my 20s. And then once I hit my mid to late 20s, and I started getting into psychology and, going to college and getting my undergrad and then my graduate degree, I found a focus. And, in some ways a hyper focus. But, back then, a hyper focus, I did it. I did great in school. And if you watch my underperforming video, I actually mentioned it earlier, I talk a lot about that, how, I was an Metza high school student, but once I hit college for the third try, and I found what I have a passion about, I killed it. I did so well. I really did so well in undergrad and grad because I had the passion. So anyway, so I think that is the thing. We are, us ADHD brains, we need that dopamine. How do we get that dopamine? By, finding something with interest, something that interests us. And for me, clearly, it was psychology. And please, please comment if you can relate to any of what I'm saying. Please comment, like and subscribe, please. If you know of any woman that this channel would be beneficial for, please, whether she has ADHD or thinks she might have ADHD, please share. And I would love to hear from everybody. What's your job history been? Can you connect the dots between your job history and having ADHD? Do you feel like ADHD affected your choice of jobs or how long you would stay at a job? Yeah, I'd be curious to hear from you all. Okay, until next time.